Yeah, well, their first big opportunity to develop unfolds tomorrow, Monday, as the Maui Invitational is set to tip off. Texas Tech's journey tips off at 1:30 on Monday against the Creighton Blue Jays, who are currently ranked top 10 in the country and a really good team. But first, I always thought of the Maui. Did you ever play the old NCAA video games, basketball games? And like you would do you do like a dynasty? And if your team got an invite to the Maui, it was like a big deal. You're like, hell yeah, I got invited to the Maui. So that's was always my thought of the Maui. It's always my favorite early season tournament. So what does this just mean for Texas Tech as a basketball program to be in this year's Maui Invitational?
Man, it's huge. I mean, yeah, like you said, I remember when I was 7, 8 years old playing NCAA 09, NCAA 10.
Yeah.
It'd be such a huge deal. You'd have all the coaches wearing Hawaiian shirts. You'd have kind of the special edition broadcast. You have the different soundtrack being played in Maui. Like, it was such a huge deal. And then growing up, seeing kind of some of the fun Maui tournaments over the years. But, I mean, I look at this tournament, it's a huge deal for Tech. I think you look back at this year's tournament going to Maui, next year going to Atlantis. You've played in the Jimmy V Classic twice in the last few years. Like, that's as big as it gets in season. Like, outside of the championship or the Champions Classic, which you're not getting invited to because it's 4 set teams.
Yep.
And outside of a couple, maybe you could say a couple, like the CBS Sports Classic with Ohio State, UCLA, UNC, and Kentucky, which again, 4 set teams. Like Maui, Battle for Atlantis, Jimmy V Classic, those are all like cornerstone college basketball in-season tournaments, relevant in-season games. And to be at that level as a program to where you're consistently getting those invites, it's a huge deal. Because, I mean, I can remember back to a few years ago with Tubby Smith era where you were basically playing, not to say irrelevant in-season tournaments, but there's a reason you'd be on ESPN News playing against the mid-major team in those tournaments, So I think it's a big deal for the program, which shows a lot of confidence that Tech is being placed in a marquee tournament, playing against a team like Creighton, a top 10 team. I mean, it's huge for the program, and it just continues what we've seen over the last few years.
So we get Creighton first up, big matchup. We'll talk to their players in just a minute, but what are your initial thoughts on Creighton as a team?
It's interesting to me because this season and last season is kind of a little bit of a reversal from, I guess, typical Creighton teams in some sense, because they're not as good shooting the three-pointer as I feel like some people may think they are. They're 35% this year, 30% last year. They brought in Bayo Shireman, who we'll get into in a little bit. He's going to be a key player, just a little spoiler there. But stylistically, what they've been really good at this year is being able to get good open two-point looks. Obviously, they've got a really good center. They've got a good team offense in general. And otherwise, I mean, it is a patented Greg McDermott offense. An offense that utilizes a good amount of half-court tempo, but the actual possession number doesn't really jump out to you. It's more so stylistically the way that they get into their offense. They make plays faster, very aggressive in transition, and then in the half-court, they're able to they get into their motion quick. And like we were mentioning with Steve Green, where it's kind of more off-ball motion, Greg McDermott's offense has always been really good at being able to set people up in that sense and having good cutters, having good action to get open three-point shooters. So I think that, again, this is another Creighton offensive team that has a lot of talent, and defensively they're a team with a lot of length. We saw last season kind of down the stretch they played some really good defensive basketball in the tournament. Again, won over San Diego State in an overtime game last year in the tournament, pushed Kansas to the brink, and had a good shot at that game down in the last minute. So talented defensive team. They returned a lot of talent from last season's squad as well. So, I mean, there's a lot to like about this Creighton team. But really, offensively, the biggest thing is it's a normal Greg McDermott team, and they're going to challenge you a lot off the ball.
All right, so teach us about Creighton and some of the players that we got to keep our eyes out for tomorrow as we look on to take the Blue Jays.
Yeah, so starting out with the tallest player on the team, 7'1", Ryan Kalkbrenner. He is probably the single most talented big the Tech has faced, I would say, in recent non-conference memory, unless I'm missing someone. Never mind. The Tech played Chet and Drew Timme last year. So that's the game a little bit ahead of myself. But point is, he's an extremely talented big. We saw last year he was really good defensively for that Creighton squad. He's really big, 7'1", 260, but he also switches. And normal amount, I would say, for a 7-footer, but he's good at switching. They feel comfortable putting him in those switches. He plays a lot of drop coverage defensively, which means that he's able to kind of hunt around the rim, kind of get those shot blocking opportunities. And I think he's kind of the anchor of their defense. And offensively, he's just been ridiculously efficient so far.
Yeah.
84% from the rim, shooting extremely well over the course of the season.
Yeah.
They've relied on him a lot early on, and I think that's paid big dividends. But Kyle Porter is the guy that I think the key for beating him is going to be kind of putting him in those pick and roll situations where they're okay with switching him. So they're not going to just like straight up leave him in the paint and avoid those situations. But he's certainly someone that you could utilize and put him in those tough situations. Ryan Nembhard is kind of the second guy. He's their point guard. Big stat for him so far this season, 27 assists and 2 turnovers. He's the brother of Andrew Nembhard, the former Gonzaga guard and former Florida guard as well. One of the most talented playmakers you're going to find. Last year, Nembhard was maybe a little bit erratic with the ball at times. This season so far, he's looked really comfortable. Not really going to beat you as a shooter too much. He's only, or I think last year was only about 29% from three. He's not someone that I think is going to be a massive floor spacer, and he's also not a great driver, but what he can do is just kind of play within the offense. He gets good looks for teammates. He's able to at least put some pressure on the rim, and I think that as a whole, he's just a solid offensive player. And defensively, even if he's challenged for height more than his brother was, he still has good instincts defensively and is important to what they do defensively. And so that's Nembhard. And then another player that I think is really important is Bill Shireman. Like I mentioned, South Dakota State transfer, 46% from three last year. Really, really good shooting. This season, not quite as good so far. He's at 41%, I think, after 3 games. But certainly Shireman's a guy that has a lot of natural talent. Yeah, I know. Put him on the bench. Don't play him. 41%. Unplayable. But no, Shireman's a guy that has a lot of talent as a shooter, good amount of length. I mean, he's kind of your prototypical 3-and-D wing that's maybe not quite as good at defense as he should be, but still, that 3-point shooting, he can hit it off the dribble, he can hit it off the catch. Like, Shireman's probably the most dangerous offensive weapon they have. And then you start getting kind of more into their, not to say their side pieces, but kind of the guys that they don't really rely on quite as much. Arthur Kaluma's second in the team in points so far this season. He's a nice versatile wing, kind of what you would expect from a Mark Adams wing, except he's a Creighton. You've got Trey Alexander, who is probably the best NBA prospect on their team. He's 6'4", sophomore season. If you watched him down the stretch of last season, he grew a lot, both as a secondary ball handler and defensively. He's probably their best on-ball defender, I would say, at least in terms of guarding against guards. I think that's going to play right into what they're trying to do. I mean, he leads the team in blocks this season. He's 6'4", and he's also been able to have a good steal rate so far. And then one more guy I want to bring up, just because he might be a name that Texas Tech fans remember, is Francisco Farabello.
Yes,
TCU transfer.
The TCU kid, yeah.
Yeah, TCU transfer. He known for... Yeah. Yeah, I think we need to bring out the cactuses for the cacti for this, just bring some cacti to Maui, see if that impacts Francisco's playing. But certainly, Farabello is a guy known as a shooter throughout his career, 4 of 15 from 3 to start this season, but he's a floor spacer. Last season, Creighton shot 30% from 3, which ridiculous for their standards. So they brought in 2 of the best shooters in the portal. And Farabello hasn't gotten a ton of minutes, but I think he'll be someone that is going to be in the rotation over the rest of the season.
Okay.
Well, yeah, great breakdown of the roster for Creighton. Makes it a little more scary once you start talking about it a little bit. So how do you think Mark Adams and this defense tries to slow down this offense, especially with like a big center and then you got a couple good shooters on the outside? It feels like really good complementary offensive basketball. What do we need to do defensively to slow them down?
Well, I think, first off, you can take a couple of key positives from this. Creighton is not a team that gets to the foul line a lot. They're sub 300 in their free throw rate, and they really don't put a ton of stress on the rim from the guards. Like, if you look at how Nembhard has played or how Trey Alexander has played, they're not getting to the rim a ton on drive attempts. It's a lot of off-ball cutting and a lot of running through Kyle Porter. So it's going to be a little bit different from some of these other teams that you might see in Big 12 play. Think of like a Baylor with Flagler, Cryer, whatever, whatnot. They're able to what Creighton's able to do is they use a lot of player movement, again, a lot of spacing, really efficient offense in that sense. So I think with what Mark Adams is going to try to do, I think you're going to put a little bit of ball pressure on Emory, even though you don't necessarily expect him to turn over the ball. If you can get them out of sorts offensively, you can kind of make that 5 or 7 second difference between when they're able to get into their stuff offensively, whether that be through tight off-ball action or simply smothering on the ball. Like, if you can do that and sort of limit the amount of time they have to get into their stuff offensively, has a bigger impact on them than some other teams that just simply rely on more ISO play, more one-on-one, more driving. So I'd say making sure to bring ball pressure, sticking tight off ball, and again, I think a lot of this game is going to come down to communication defensively, because so far this season, Tech's had some lapses defensively. They haven't been quite as crisp as I feel like the final score might have indicated, but certainly those two things are going to be critical: communication and kind of bringing some on and off ball pressure. And also, some of this is just offensive scheming as well. Like, at the end of the day, if you give up a ton of turnovers, Creighton's not a team that turns the ball over themselves. I mean, one of them, again, we talked about Nemard being extremely reliable as a ball handler, but they simply do not turn the ball over. They're at an 11.7% turnover percentage so far this season. That is pretty much as high as or as low as anyone among all high major schools. So Creighton doesn't turn the ball over. So if you beat yourself, you're probably getting beat. And I think just keeping them out of transition, keeping them from running their half-court stuff right away, and just trying your best to avoid defensive lapses. It's early in the season. It's also a game in Maui. Might have a little bit of distraction there, but I think you're just going to have to try to do as much as you can, communicate well defensively, and not beat yourself, because Creighton, if you let them, is just going to take advantage of that.
Yeah.
And I would say one more thing is, if you're Daniel Baccio, avoid fouls, because if Baccio gets in foul trouble, this team, one of the key differences from last year is you don't have the array of wings that you could just throw onto the bigs and double, triple team, whatever. You're going to have to roll with Kevin O'Banner and KJ Allen for significant minutes if Baccio gets in foul trouble, and that would not be ideal against the big like Cal Corner that has the size and kind of knows how to use it. So, yeah, again, earlier, and I said it was important to get AMAC back just for depth purposes, regardless of how impactful he may or may not be. This game is exactly why that's the case.
Yeah. Well, let's get him into foul trouble, and that might help us out a little bit. But let's turn over to the offensive side of the ball. What do you think our offense needs to do to attack this Creighton defense? And we saw it a couple times last year when it became shot-making games. It became hard. You know, the Duke game, they didn't miss a single shot. When we got, Gonzaga all of a sudden had the best shooting performance of their season against us. If Creighton's hitting shots, what do we have to do to hang with them if it gets to be where it's going to be a high-scoring game?
Simply don't turn the ball over 20 times. I think if you can avoid turnovers and play efficient half-court offense, it doesn't necessarily have to be the prettiest thing, but really, if we've seen the first 3 games, you have individual players that can make things happen. We've seen Davion Harmon late in shot clock. We've seen Puff Isaacs. Jalen Tyson's hit a number of contested shots. Like, I'm not worried about the shot making of this team, but you've got to get a shot off first, and you have to at least make them somewhat efficient looks. And so I think what that consists of is playing a patient but efficient style of offense. So you're not wasting time per se, but you're also making sure that you get to the right shot and continuing to utilize the ball movement. Because I feel like we've seen it at various points this season, quite a lot of good half-court offense stemming from just efficient ball movement. And if you can avoid making an ISO game, because Creighton's not going to isolate like that, I think it gives you enough to maybe be able to keep up with them even if they have a really hot shooting night. And again, just avoiding beating yourself offensively. Do not turn the ball over too many times, and you should have a chance to at least try to get what you want to offensively. And if the shots are falling, they are falling, but you have to be able to at least get yourself to that point.
All right, so a lot of Maui talk there, a lot of Creighton. How do you think the first game works out? Are we going into the winner side of the bracket after this game?
I'm going to take them to win. I think Tech has enough talent offensively to be able to win if it gets down to kind of a late game offensive shootout. I think defensively you have Daniel Bacho, who's probably going to be one of the best defenders Kalkbrenner has to face all season long.
Yeah.
And I've really just got faith that at the end of the day, this game kind of it's as much about just seeing what your guys can do in a pressure situation. You've been in a La Tech game that kind of came down to the wire a little bit,
yeah.
But at the same time, like it's also a game that you never really had that much doubt about. Whereas this game, you're coming into it, Creighton's coming into it. Neither of the teams have been really tested. We haven't seen Creighton have to face tough competition. And I think Tech has enough talent offensively. They've got Davion Harmon. You have Pop Isaacs at the guard positions. I think that might be a slight weakness for Creighton is Nembhard defensively against a guy like Davion Harmon. I think as well as that offensively, in theory, they're not a team that drives a ton, which should favor you over another team or other teams that can take advantage of guys like Pop on the defensive side of things. They're not a team that gets to the foul line a lot. So in theory, if you play a smart style of basketball, you're not putting yourself in too much foul trouble.
Yeah.
And they're not an elite three-point shooting team, at least off the basis of what we have so far and off of the historical tendencies of the guys on the roster. You would say that they have a couple of really, really good shooters in Shireman and Farabello, and maybe you could debate between the merits of Alexander being a great shooter as well, but they're not guys that are going to be like, outside of Shireman and Farabello, they're not guys that are going to be those 45, 50% three-point shooters. So if they're going to outshoot you, it's going to be an outlier night where they're shooting 45%, which again, if that happens,
yeah, it happens.
Probably lose.
Yeah.
But you can't just go into it expecting, hey, they're going to have outlier shooting nights. So
right.
I've got faith in Tech in this one. I think that this Creighton team has a lot of talent. They returned a lot of talent from last year, but at the same time, this is also a type of team that is not unlike an average, just slightly above average tier Big 12 team. Like if you look at the analytics, they would say in terms of tier ranking KenPom, this is a game Tech is either slightly favored in or slightly trail or slightly underdogs in. If you look at last year's Creighton team, they were finished outside the top 50 in tier rank. Like this is not a Creighton team that on paper is top 10 like they're ranked. And maybe they end up that way at the end of the year. But right now, like you go off of what you have, and I would say that this is a game that Tech can pretty easily win. I feel like matchup-wise, match up pretty well. So I'll take Tech to win this one, even if it's a little bit sketchy to pick, knowing just how well Creighton could shoot if it's their day.
Well, that makes me feel a lot better that you're still going with the Red Raiders tomorrow. Let's kind of talk a little bit more about the Maui. Now we're not going to break down the rest of the tournament. I know you did that on with Taco and Tech, but we're just kind of focused on Texas Tech's journey here. So question. So you obviously got us beating Creighton Monday. Over under 1.5 wins for the Red Raiders in Maui, what would you take?
So on Taco and Tech, I picked one win, and I picked it against Creighton.
Yeah.
But then I had Tech losing to Arkansas. I had them losing to Arizona. I'm going to stick with that, which makes the answer to the question being under. But I'll preface this by saying there's also a scenario where you lose to Creighton on game 1, beat Louisville game 2, beat Ohio State game 3. Suddenly then you have a 2-1 record.
Right, yeah.
So I'd say like the first game and how that plays out in the rest of the tournament, how it plays out on the other side of the bracket has a lot to do with how I would predict this, because I think Arkansas and San Diego State are the two best teams in the tournament from my perspective. And I wouldn't take Tech in a straight-up fight against either of them, at least at this point. I think you have a chance in both games, but I don't think it's going to be easy for you to win those. And then Arizona's kind of a coin flip type of game. The other, and then Creighton, same sort of deal. I'd say kind of like a 50-50. And then the other three are, Ohio State, Cincinnati, Arkansas, I would say are all games you'd be favored to some degree. And so it all kind of depends on who you end up matching up against at the end of the bracket. But I'm just going to go with what I say. I'll give me the under, as much as that pains me to say. But I think a win over Creighton kind of offsets that.
Right.
I agree.
Dustin, question to you. What do you got for this tournament?
I'll be the hopeful optimist here and take the over. I don't think we're going to go win the whole damn thing, but I'll take 2 wins somehow on either side of this bracket, kind of like Emory just broke down. We can do it on the loser's side. I'd rather win the first game, and whether we get to that third place game or runner-up that's okay. But I think 2 wins is definitely doable for this.
Yeah. I'm kind of with Emory where I think if we beat Creighton, I think it's 1 because I don't think it would just kind of shock me if we beat Arkansas.
Sure.
But I would be really happy to be on the winner's bracket side. But if we're on the losing side of game 1, I think, obviously Louisville is off to a brutal start this season. So I feel comfortable saying that we can get that win. And then I'll take my chances in the consolation championship game against whoever's over there. So I think we're going to lose to Creighton though. But I'm going to go with 2 in the losers bracket side, 2 wins over there. So over, but not on the right side of the bracket. So,
sure.
Take that with what you want.
So Emory, once Maui's all over with, what would be a successful trip to you if we do certain things?
I think you either have to win one of the big games, so to speak, beat Creighton on day 1, or for whatever reason, if you somehow end up facing Arkansas on day 2, if hell freezes over and Louisville beats Arkansas on day 1, or if an Arizona or San Diego State loses in their first 2 games and ends up playing you in day 3. Point is, you want to end this weekend or this week with at least one quad 1 win. I think that's kind of the tangible side of things. Play close in all 3 of your games. Don't get blown out.
Yes.
That just kind of gives a bad message. And I think the biggest intangible thing is I just want to see how the rotation looks at the end of the week. If you can make significant progress forward with a guy like Lamar Washington and feel confident with an 8-man rotation heading into the Georgetown game, I feel like you feel pretty good about this team. Even if it only results in 1 win, maybe 2 wins. If you can play these high-level teams, get a win or 2, show off kind of the potential of the team, and learn a lot about how you're going to run the rotation, get some guys some experience, I think you consider that a win. And, I mean, best case scenario, you win the whole tournament.
That'd be great.
You shoot up to the top 10, all those good things. Well,
Jeff Goodman has to rank you.
Yeah, unless you're Jeff Goodman, and then you just don't have tech in your rankings. But, yeah, top 10. You win everything, you're in the top 10. But I think realistically, just winning a game or 2, putting up some good tape, learning a lot on your rotation, I think you can call that a successful trip to Maui.
Yeah, I agree with that. This question might be a little bit difficult, but it's something that I think I used to listen to Russillo, and when he had Cannell on, they would do predict the storylines after the NFL week or whatever. I think this is kind of a fun question, but kind of like the Pop Isaacs was the storyline after Louisiana Tech. Predict a couple storylines that you think might be after the Maui Invitational is completed for Texas Tech Red Raiders.
Narratives will be formed about Daniel Bacho. They'll be good narratives.
I like that.
I think we're going to see game 1 against Ryan Kalkbrenner. I have a good feeling that this is the Daniel Bacho game, part whatever. And we see maybe a career high in points, a good rebounding showing. He shuts him down defensively. Maybe not 6 blocks like we saw in the last game. There's still a lot to like about it. I think Bacho's performance will be a storyline. How Davion Harmon reacts as a point guard over the 3-game stretch in Maui. And how did the freshmen do? Do we see Lamar Washington and Elijah Fisher in the rotation? My hunch says at least one of them has rotation minutes. And does Pop Isaac still start? Does he still get consistent minutes? Does he still turn the ball over? Does Viva still tweet about him, et cetera, et cetera? All of those stuff, I think we'll see what the answers are.
Catch y'all at the next tailgate.